Separation of church and state. Basically, what this means is that you have to keep religion out of public places, mainly schools. Back in the 1950s, 1960s, it was very commonplace to start a school day with a prayer. Problem becomes that as our population of this country becomes more multicultural, as people start to become more outspoken, as people start to stand up for themselves more, all of these things can be good, but with them can come some unintended, I don't want to say consequences, but some unintended situations that you maybe hadn't planned for. And one of those is that when they were doing prayers in schools, of course, they are predominantly Christian based prayers. Problem is, not everyone that goes to public schools believes in Christianity. Not saying they don't believe in religion, but just not a Christian religion. So, what do you do about those students that are Hindu, or that are Buddhist, or that are Muslim, or that are Jewish, or that maybe believe in Kwanzaa, or don't believe in religion at all, or they're Jehovah's Witnesses? You can't do a prayer for absolutely everyone. And so finally it got to the point where the Supreme Court said, that's it. You got to keep religion out of public places, because unless you can somehow give everyone an equal opportunity to practice what their religion, what their religious beliefs are, you got to keep it out of the public schools. And so you have separation of church and state. Flexible response. Eisenhower wanted massive retaliation. Kennedy became president and he said, it makes no sense. You know, you're starting to get, I guess you could say almost like terrorist groups. You're starting to get small groups of people that are causing problems. It's not a country, it's a group within a country. Well, you just don't go and drop a nuclear bomb on a group of people in a country because you're essentially attacking the country. And so Kennedy's saying, you know, fight fire with fire. If you have a small group, then you retaliate likewise. You don't have to go after an entire country. If you drop a nuclear bomb on a group of people in a country, it makes it look like you're going after the country. And so there needs to be more flexibility. And so that's what Kennedy ended up going back to. Alliance for Progress, not going to worry about that. The Peace Corps, don't have time to talk about that. Space race. When Kennedy becomes president, the Russians were way ahead of the United States in the space race. In 1957, they launched Sputnik, the first satellite to orbit the Earth. Then a couple years after that, it's the first cosmonaut is sent up into space. And the United States, we're still trying to figure out how in the world to get a guy into outer space. We finally accomplished that in 1962. But Kennedy, in his inaugural address, said that the United States would be the first country to land a man on the moon. We did accomplish that in 1969. Unfortunately, Kennedy was not around to see that reality happen, but we did accomplish that. You have Neil Armstrong, the first man to step foot on the moon. Buzz Aldrin was right behind him, coming down the ladder. And we did it before the Russians did. Bay of Pigs was a huge embarrassment for the United States. We tried to help Cuban exiles overthrow Fidel Castro in Cuba. Ends up blowing up in the face of the United States. And it's an embarrassment. Then there's the Berlin Wall. East Berlin is having a brain drain. What I mean by that is educated people, doctors, lawyers, scientists, college professors, they're leaving East Berlin. They want to get out of communism. There's just no room for them to grow academically, financially. If they go to West Berlin, it's completely different over there. And so what happens is those in East Germany, the communists, they're contacting Nikita Khrushchev, and they're saying, we're losing all of our professionals. And Khrushchev's like, what do you mean you're losing them? We're losing them. They're crossing the border and they're going over to West Berlin. And Khrushchev says, that's it. Block all crossings. And so literally overnight, Russian soldiers put up razor wire from one end of Berlin to the other, and there's only a couple places where you can cross. The very place where that razor wire went up ends up being where the Berlin Wall goes up. And normally I talk more about the Berlin Wall and its actual construction, but without visuals, it doesn't do you much good. So we're just going to move on. The wall ends up staying up till 1990, till Reagan's president. Then there's the Cuban Missile Crisis. What happens is that a U-2 spy plane, very similar to the plane that got shot down over Russia, is flying over Cuba. It takes the pictures that you see there on the notes. And lo and behold, there are Russian nuclear missiles, and they're pointed right at the United States. You're talking 90 miles from Cuba to Florida. Kennedy gets on the horn and he tells Khrushchev, hey, why do you have these missiles pointed at us? And Khrushchev's like, missiles? What missiles? And he says, I've got pictures of them right here. And Khrushchev says, oh, okay, well, yes, we have missiles in Cuba. You have missiles in Turkey pointed at us. And Kennedy's like, oh, missiles? What missiles? And he's like, oh, give me a break. I've got pictures. So they call each other's bluff, and turns out, yeah, okay, each country has missiles pointed at one another. Kennedy says, well, your missiles are a heck of a lot closer to us than ours are to you. Get the missiles out. And Khrushchev's like, no. Kennedy says, okay, we're going to put a naval blockade around Cuba. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out. Cuba's not a self-sustaining country. They need food. They need medicine. They need raw materials. They need medical supplies. And Kennedy says the people of Cuba are going to suffer because you, Soviet Union, will not get your missiles out of there. And Khrushchev says that, Fidel Castro and Cuba, they are our ally. Doing this to them is like doing this to us. Remove your blockade, or I'm going to send the Soviet Navy over there. And Kennedy doesn't believe me. He says, not taking down the naval blockade around Cuba. Khrushchev says, okay. He orders ships from the Russian Navy to go to Cuba. The world is on edge because it looks like World War III is going to break out. You have the two most powerful countries in the world. Their naval ships are getting ready for battle. There's a clock counting down, okay, it should be so many days, hours, minutes, seconds until Russian Navy is within firing distance of the U.S. Navy. And Kennedy and Khrushchev are constantly on the phone with one another on a daily basis and, trying to get the other to back down first. And the clock continues to count down and the world is even more on edge. And then right at the last moment, the Russians back down. It appears as if the United States has won, but not really, because yes, the Russian Navy backs down and Russia pulls their missiles out of Cuba, but we also pull our missiles out of Turkey as well. And then, unfortunately, November 22nd, 1963, JFK is on a campaign trip, and he's going through Texas. Normally, we would be watching a documentary over JFK's final days. It talks nothing about the assassination. It just talks about the days leading up to it. Nonetheless, and it's an excellent documentary. JFK is in Dallas. He's on a campaign trip, and he's riding in the limo. The motorcade drives in front of the Texas State Book Depository building. There's a shot that rings out, and initially people don't know what's going on. A second shot rings out. It strikes Kennedy in the back, between his right shoulder blade and his spine, right at the base of the neck. It exits out just above the very top of the sternum, right by the windpipe. It actually goes through the seat in front of him. It hits Governor Connally, and then ends up lodging, I believe it's in Connally's right wrist. Before those in the car know what happens, a second shot rings out, and this one strikes Kennedy right in the back of the head, halfway between the ear and the back of the head, slightly up from about mid-ear, and this is a fatal shot. And Kennedy is rushed to the hospital, and about an hour and a half later, he is pronounced dead. A description of a man leaving the Texas State Book Depository building is given. A Dallas police officer sees a man fitting the description, stops the man, calls the man over. This man walks over to the officer, shoots the officer, and kills him. Now the manhunt is on. The man ends up being Lee Harvey Oswald. Oswald is trapped in a movie theater. He is taken from there to Dallas Police Headquarters. He's held there for a number of hours being questioned. He is being led out by the sheriff of the county that Dallas sits in, when another man by the name of Jack Ruby walks up and shoots Oswald in the abdomen. Oswald is taken to the exact same hospital that Kennedy was taken to, and Oswald himself dies from the wound. Ruby is arrested. Ruby is awaiting trial, and while Jack Ruby is awaiting trial, Ruby has a heart attack and dies. So, no one really knows why Oswald shot Kennedy, if Oswald was even the man that shot Kennedy. Chief Justice Earl Warren is put in charge of a commission that is ordered by new President Lyndon Johnson to investigate the Kennedy assassination. The Warren Commission concludes that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. And the case is shut. It's sealed up, and it was sealed up for something like 45 years until it was reopened. Now, there were all kinds of conspiracy theories as to who really shot Kennedy, why he was shot. Jack Ruby is an interesting story. He's a nightclub owner from New Orleans who had actually been to Cuba just a couple months before all of this happened. Lee Harvey Oswald himself was a self-proclaimed communist and actually applied for Soviet citizenship and was denied the opportunity to become a citizen of the Soviet Union. Some people think Oswald did it because he was upset with the way Kennedy had been treating the communists, was upset with what had happened with the Bay of Pigs fiasco, with the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Berlin Wall going up, Kennedy not backing down on having the three zones in Berlin stay merged, that is the French, British, and U.S. zone, allowing those to stay as one zone. And then some say, well, no, Ruby had connections in Cuba, and that Oswald was ordered to do it by the communists, and then Ruby came in to silence Oswald. You know, just all different types of conspiracy theories. Normally, we would spend more time talking about it. We would look at the Zapruder films. If you want to look at these videos right here, you can. These are videos that show the assassination of Kennedy and of Oswald. When you try to go to these, because this is YouTube, they may have been pulled. In fact, I think one or both of these may have been pulled. But if you look hard enough, you can find them. So I'm going to stop right here. We will pick up with Lyndon Baines Johnson.